We have the pleasure of welcoming Jacob Morgan today to our interview series Leaders Hum. I'm Ashwarya Jain from the peopleHum team. Before we begin, just a quick intro of peopleHum. peopleHum is an end-to-end, one-view integrated human capital management automation platform, the winner of the 2019 Global Cody Award for HCM that is specifically built for crafted employee experiences and the future of work with AI and automation technologies. We run the peopleHum blog and video channel, which receives upwards of 200,000 visitors a year and publish around 2 interviews with well-known names globally every month. And now for our guest, Jacob Morgan. He is one of the most influential keynote speakers out there. He has made his mark by publishing his best-selling book, The Future Leader. He is the founder of the Future of Work University and has been helping organizations through his speeches and writings to improve the experience of employees and customers. He's a speaker, author, and futurist, and we are very sure he has a lot of experiences to share with our audience today. Welcome, Jacob. We're thrilled to have you.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. So, Jacob, I'm just going to start with a very generic question, and I'm sure a lot of people ask you that. But I think this is important for our viewers and, just for you to give a little bit about what is the future leader and what's your vision with the future leader?
Sure. So the book, as you mentioned, is called The Future Leader, and it really seeks to answer two questions, which I was trying to figure out. In fact, I have a copy here. So there you go. That's the book right there. So it just came out a couple of weeks ago. And so really the goal of the book is to answer two questions, which are, will the leader of 2030 be that different than the leader of today? And if so, how will that leader be different? And this was a question that I was getting asked a lot by business leaders and executives at companies all over the world. And I didn't have any data or research on it, and I couldn't find any data or research on it. So I decided to go out and collect it. So I interviewed 140 CEOs around the world and surveyed 14,000 employees in partnership with LinkedIn. And the book really identifies what are the most important skills and mindsets that leaders of the future need to have in order to be successful. So that's the main part of what the book is about. I look at trends shaping the future leader, the biggest challenges that leaders are going to have to overcome. And then by surveying these 14,000 employees, we were really able to get a sense of how well are we doing today to prepare for the future? Where are the gaps between different seniority levels? And so all that research and the findings went into the book, which I think is pretty unique. I haven't seen anything like this done before. Mm-hmm. So I'm hoping that people will find it quite useful and valuable.
So building high performance teams is something that everybody's struggling with. And you talk about how you need to, really make goals and make them real. So what do you think is the main challenge here? Now I can make goals and I can kind of adhere to them, but is it just a mindset issue, or how am I supposed to change myself to get to that goal?
Well, so in the book, I talk about 4 mindsets and 5 skills that future leaders need to have. And I mean, having goals is kind of a part of it. I think there's been a lot written about goals and how to set goals, and all leaders have goals. So it's not so much how to have goals, it's how you need to behave and how you need to think. So, for example, I talk about the importance of curiosity, of being a lifelong learner, of being able to be tech savvy and digitally fluent, the importance of being able to make other people more successful than you, thinking like a futurist where you look at different scenarios and possibilities instead of just kind of like picking one path and going down it, emotional intelligence. So I specifically look at how should a future leader think and what the future leaders specifically need to know how to do. And goals isn't something I addressed in there too much just because, the CEOs didn't tell me that is a crucial skill for future leaders, because I think it's, just something that a part of what leaders need to do. And I think we're pretty good at setting goals. But this is more around behaviors and skills as opposed to like, goal set. Mindset and learning things that you need to know to be successful. For example, a lot of leaders need to learn more about empathy and self-awareness, right? Emotional intelligence. A lot of leaders need to know or learn how to get better with technology, how to be tech savvy and digitally fluent. A lot of leaders need to learn how to become better coaches to their team members, to their peers, to their employees at the company. A lot of leaders need to, learn how to do all these different things. But a lot of leaders also need to think in different ways. They need to think in terms of how do we balance humanity and technology. They need to think in terms of how do we, as leaders, spend time being curious and being lifelong learners ourselves. They need to think in terms of how do we serve other people instead of having them serve us. So there's changes in how leaders need to think, and there's a certain set of skills that leaders need to learn how to master. And that's ultimately what I look at with the book. And a lot of the skills and mindsets that I talk about, people have heard of. It's not like, we're making something new here. The challenge is that a lot of leaders don't practice the skills and mindsets today. In fact, the number of leaders who practice these skills and mindsets today very well is in the single digits, maybe 8-9% for mid and senior level leaders. So there's a lot of opportunity here. The other challenge is that a lot of leaders get promoted to their positions for various reasons. A lot of the times it's because they've been at the company for a long time. Maybe they've brought in a lot of money. They've closed some big deals. Maybe because they know how to navigate the bureaucracy of the organization. But none of these things means that these leaders should be in their roles. I mean, we look at how many stories out there of leaders who are corrupt, who don't treat their employees well, who hurt the environment, who steal. They don't have these skills and mindsets. They got there because of kind of these other means of getting there. So when I interviewed these 140 CEOs, really what they told me is that to be a leader in the future, you won't be able to be in any kind of leadership position unless you practice these things. Whereas today, these things are important, but a lot of people are still kind of sneaking through the cracks and getting into leadership positions without being emotionally intelligent, without serving their people, without focusing on coaching. And we all work for these types of leaders. If we didn't, the engagement scores for companies around the world would be much higher than they really are. But unfortunately, a lot of people don't like their leaders. So I'm hoping this book will change that.
It's all about paying it forward. And then if you cannot kind of share the knowledge with your team, then that just makes no sense that, you're a leader and you're not kind of playing your role there. And also, do you think that because of the pandemic, a lot of things are now going to change for leaders? And, what is it that they should focus on right now? And how are they supposed to be prepared for what's coming? And what do you think is coming?
Well, it's interesting because a lot of leaders now are having to lead teams that they can't see. They're having to lead teams who work on different hours now instead of showing up to the office for a set period of time. They're having to do performance management for teams that they can't see. They're having to focus on culture for teams that they can't see. They're having to do all these things now in a very, very different way. They're having to really focus on emotional intelligence now. So one of the things that I find really interesting with this whole coronavirus pandemic is that a lot of the conversation around technology and job automation has disappeared. You don't hear about that in the news anymore. Instead, all the conversations you keep hearing about are the importance of being human. We keep hearing stories about CEOs like the CEO of Visa who says, we're not going to furlough or lay off any employees due to the virus in 2020. Or we see videos like the CEO of Marriott, create these very passionate, human videos about the impact that this is having for his employees. And you can see him getting emotional and teary-eyed as he talks about this. So all the conversations now are much more about being a human leader, being emotionally intelligent, connecting with your people, the importance of all of this type of stuff, which I think is fantastic. So it really goes to show that business is still very much, and for the foreseeable future, will very much be human, built on relationships, built on people. So one of the most important things that I think this means for leaders, and I talk about a lot of these skills and mindsets in the book, for starters, you need to care. You need to care about your people, genuinely really care. A lot of the conversations now that you have with your people, they can't just be work conversations. You asking about families and how they're doing and if they're struggling. It's thinking differently if an employee is not performing well. Instead of saying, you're not hitting your numbers, it's asking, are you doing okay? How are you? Is everything, are you having any issues in your personal life that I might be able to help you with? So it's really being more of a human being as a leader, I think, for starters. Second of all, it's really forcing us to think differently in terms of how we communicate and collaborate and lead. Right? I mean, it's one thing to see somebody, to be able to go over to somebody and talk to them and see their body language. It's another thing to be able to use something like this, right? A webcam and a microphone. And so this, I think, is a challenge for leaders because they're trying to navigate, how do we set up guidelines, and how do I guide my employees so that they can still be effective and productive while they're working remotely. And one of the most interesting things I think that we're going to see out of this is that after this is all over, by the end of the year, by the beginning of next year, no organization is going to be able to use "we don't have flexible work programs" as an excuse anymore, because this is perhaps the biggest flexible work experiment in the history of the world. I mean, it is. Millions of people around the world, business is still going on, sales are still being made, deals are still being closed, products and services are still being marketed, HR team, everything is still functioning, but everybody's doing it remotely. And I know people who've been in organizations for 30, 40, 50 years, never worked from home, never had a flexible work program. Now they're working from home for several weeks and months. So this is really going to, I think, force leaders to challenge conventional ways of working in the future. It'll force us to revisit all of our outdated workplace practices, our technologies. And it's interesting. It really, for a lot of organizations, it jumped us forward like 10, 20 years. So from a pure business perspective, of course, the coronavirus is a complete tragedy, the impact that it's having on the economy and so many families and individuals out there. From a purely business perspective, it's really causing organizations to fast forward, really focus on their digital transformation, changing their workplace practices. So I don't think anything will ever be the same after this is over. Yeah, and there's no training manual or blueprint on how to do this. I have a team of 10 people that I work with, and I've never been put in this kind of a situation before. So, I try to be a human leader. I try to just talk to my team and say, hey, how's everybody doing? Are you guys okay? We have a group Skype chat. Every month, we do an all hands kind of virtual meeting together where we all turn on video. They set that. They said that they want to do it once a month. We of course we talk every day, but I mean, getting all 10 people together on video is something that they said, let's every month we just want to check in with each other and see each other's faces. And so they kind of came up with the solution. They said, we want to have this group Skype chat. We want to do a video call every month. We want to just be able to check in with each other. So I came to them with the problem and I said, look, I've never been in this kind of a situation. What do you guys think we should do? What are your ideas? What feedback do you have? And together we came up with what works and supports everybody and something that everybody is happy with. So I think leaders at organizations need to do the same thing. Before you try to make a decision for people, why don't you involve them in the decision-making process? Because like I said, there's no blueprint for this. So this is where the humility, the humbleness, the vulnerability comes into play. And as a leader, it's okay to say, look, I got to be honest with you guys. I'm not really sure what to do here. I've never been faced with this. Can we just talk? And I'd love to hear your ideas. What can I do? What can you do? And let's see what we can figure out.
Absolutely. I think you just cannot keep pretending as a leader that you have everything right in your toolkit.
Yeah.
You've got everything aligned. No, I mean, you are a human and you have problems and you just have to be transparent about that. So you become more relatable, right?
Yeah. This is a very classic example of leaders can no longer say that they have all the answers because you never know when something like this is going to happen. And so, we don't have all the answers. And what do you do when you don't have all the answers? The traditional approach for a leader is you make it up because nobody's going to question you because you're the leader. So just make something up and everyone's just going to agree with you. But now, you can't make things up anymore. You have to be okay with saying, I don't know, I need help. I've never been faced with this kind of a situation before. And so I think it's really, really putting the emphasis on being a truly human leader. And it's showing us who the good leaders are and who the bad leaders are. Because if you can't become human, if you can't embrace these things, you really should have you have no business being a leader of people.
Absolutely. And it's about emotional intelligence. So tell me something, Jacob. Do you peg emotional intelligence at a higher level than, intelligence quotient?
Well, I think you need everything. There's no secret that if you're going to be a leader of a team, a leader of a function, of a leader of a company, you obviously need to be an intelligent person, but you also need to have emotional intelligence. But you can't just be good at your job. You can't just be good at numbers. You can't just be good at making products or services. You also need to be good at leading people. From the human perspective. So I think more and more what we're starting to see is that emotional intelligence is just as important as, if not more important than just purely the regular intelligence aspect. Because you can be super smart, but if you're a super smart jerk, and if you're a super smart person nobody wants to work for or with, it's not going to help you very much. So you really need to be able to have both of those things. Good at your job, good at your niche, but also somebody who is good at working with and leading people.
Mm-hmm. Right. So kind of like a balance between IQ and EQ to create a maximized performing team. And
a lot of leaders struggle with that. I know a lot of very, very smart leaders out there who've been in the business for a long time. And you ask them how to create a product or a service or how to build a company, and they're amazing at it. But you ask them to connect with people on a human level, and they have no idea what to do. Right. So you need to learn how to connect with people at a human level. Can you make friends with people? Can you build trust? Can you create psychological safety? These are essential components for running a business, for creating effective teams. And we need this now more than ever, as opposed to somebody who just knows how to run a business.
Absolutely. And kind of climbing up the Maslow's hierarchy where, you're trying to conquer every level of the pyramid and going towards, self-satisfaction, self-actualization, because, you've kind of conquered the first few bases, the essential bases. And I think leaders can really help in doing that, right?
Wait, who's enjoying that, you said?
So it's a journey where, leaders can help employees really kind of...
journey, you said, yes.
Journey, right, yes.
Yeah. I mean, part of being a leader, and even one of the things that I talk about in the book, is that this is a never-ending journey. You're not, you can't just take a course on leadership and then all of a sudden I'm a great leader. Things change, new things like, this coronavirus come our way. So we constantly need to be learning and evolving and adapting. It's a never ending journey, but it's also probably the most rewarding thing that anybody can do.
Absolutely. And, what according to you is essential to create a great employee experience in organizations? And, how does culture have bearing and inclusivity play a part in creating such a generic experience? And do you think personalization plays a part in it?
I talk about 3 environments that shape all employee experiences, which are culture, technology, and physical space. So these are the 3 things. Any organization that wants to create a great experience for their people, those are the only 3 things you need to focus on: culture, technology, and space. And underneath each one of those environments, there are several different attributes. So under culture, for example, there are 10 things. There are 4 things under physical space and 3 things under technology. And diversity inclusion is one of the components that fits under culture. So it does matter, but it also means that just because you have a diverse and inclusive organization doesn't by itself mean that you're going to create great experiences for your people, because you need to focus on all the other aspects of culture. Things like, so diversity, inclusion, making sure your employees are treated fairly, purpose and meaning, health and well-being, coaching and mentoring, like all these other different aspects matter. But if you have a diverse and inclusive environment, but you have outdated workplace practices, the spaces look terrible, the employees don't have modern tools to do their job, there's no health and well-being program, nobody's being coached and mentored. If none of these other things are there, I don't care how diverse and inclusive your organization is, the overall experience at your company is still going to be bad. So diversity and inclusion does matter. It is a part of the culture aspect of employee experience, but I think organizations, they constantly ask, what's the one thing we can do? There's no one thing. There's no low-hanging fruit here. Organizations need to stop thinking like that because people are complex. Organizations are complex. Employee experience, it's not an easy thing to do. So as much as diversity and inclusion is important, we need to also look at these other things too.
Right. It's kind of a gray area because you're kind of getting involved with such diverse kind of people out there, right? But
yeah,
what is the simple part in this? Is it the tech stack? Is it tools? Can tools really help in creating a great employee experience?
Well, technology is 30% of the overall employee experience. And these are the tools and resources employees have access to do their job. Hardware, devices, software, apps, all of these things are a part of the technology environment for employee experience. And technology is the central nervous system of the organization. It's what allows a lot of these things when we say the future of work to be a reality, like real-time recognition and feedback, flexible work. That is technology. Without technology, you can't do any of that stuff. So it matters, and it matters quite a bit.
Nobody really knows, what's coming their way. So I think it's better to be prepared at this point in time, right? And, what's your take on the millennial workforce and the gig economy rising? So we have like different kinds of, categorizations. Do you think this trend is relevant with respect to the future of work?
Yeah, I mean, it's growing. There are a lot of gig workers out there, and I think it's certainly going to increase, but a lot of the reports and studies that were done very much overinflated the numbers. By far, for the foreseeable future, most people in the world are going to be employed full-time for an organization. We're not going to have like hundreds of millions of people who are working for themselves out there. That's just not a reality. So I think the full-time employment's not going to go away anytime soon. But the trend towards gig work is also increasing. So it's something to pay attention to, but it's not to the point of full-time employment will be replaced by gig work. I don't think it's anywhere near close for that happening. So people shouldn't think that that's on the horizon, but they still should pay attention to gig work because it is increasing. And, technically, I suppose I'm considered a gig worker. When I give talks to organizations. So it's a great way to be in control of your life, in control of your career. I'm a big fan of it. It's not for everybody. And I don't think it's going to replace full-time employment for the majority of people in the world. And my wife and I, we both believe that the only job security that exists is the one that you can create for yourself. As we see now, as much as there are wonderful organizations out there, when something like coronavirus happens, when an organization doesn't meet its numbers, if you're having things that you're struggling with, the company's going to let you go. There's no organization out there, or very, very few organizations out there are really going to put you first. So nobody's going to look out for you but you. So I fundamentally believe, and my experiences have shown me this, and I see this from people all over the world who get laid off or fired or, whatever happens. And it happened to my wife as well. That when the company struggles, people are the first to go. Yeah. So, I am a big believer, if you can make it happen, to be your own boss, control your own destiny, build your own path, and don't rely on anyone else.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think organizations talk a lot about, people are our main asset and we focus a lot on our people, but people are also the first expendable asset when it, comes to such times and in such crisis times, right? So
yeah, I mean, it happens all the time, unfortunately. So, that's one of the reasons why my wife and I put this podcast out.
Yeah, that is wonderful. And I think it'll help a lot of viewers and listeners kind of comprehend what the situation is, what's happening with them and how they can cope with it. Because I think a lot of people are struggling with that, and it's something beautiful that you're doing. And, really thank you and kudos to you for that. And, kind of ending, just ending the discussion here, I want to ask you if there are any important sound bites that you'd like to leave our viewers with.
Probably the most important thing I can tell people is if you don't think about and plan for the future of work, then you are not going to have a future. And this is true for your organization or for yourself in your personal life. You need to don't assume that your company or an educational institution is going to teach you everything you need to know to be successful personally or professionally. You got to take things into your own hands, and it's never been easier to do that with all the tools and resources we have at our disposal. I mean, I'm learning things all the time. I'm constantly trying to learn new things. I try to do something every year that I didn't do the year before, whether it's starting a daily vlog, whether it's launching courses, whether it's learning more about marketing, whatever it is. Every year I do something for the business that I didn't do the year before. And I think a lot of people need to think that way of, not waiting for a company to say, hey, your job is changing. Maybe you should learn this. You need to know that before your company tells you. So I think the biggest piece of advice I can offer people is take more control over your life, over your career, because nobody's going to look out for you but you.
Absolutely. That's a wonderful message. Be informed and create your own knowledge base so that no one can question you and you are well prepared with all the weapons in your toolkit.
Yep.
So, right. Thank you so much, Jacob, for that wonderful message and wonderful conversation. I think it's really been a learning experience for me. I learned something today, and I think our viewers too will learn from that. So thank you so much for your time. It was a pleasure having you.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.